don't have a lapel mic this morning, obviously, but I do have this. And when you speak, we can still pick you up on this mic right here. It's a lot better having the mic that you hold. Do I not look a little more formidable holding a mic than, not holding a mic? That's right. All right, we tackled or tried to tackle an awful lot this morning. Who has the first question? Yeah, Dave.
Faithfulness in interpreting the book.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I'm hung up on something, but how does faithfulness help us interpret the two witnesses?
You're way ahead of me. We have to know who the two witnesses are or what they represent, first of all.
So by being faithful, we will be able to. I guess I'm a little hung up. Maybe I'm out in left field. I don't know.
Okay, are you asking me how? I'm not quite sure your question.
The question.
If we don't want to be faithful, then we won't understand the witnesses, or?
No, the question is, how does being faithful to Christ help us interpret that passage?
Okay.
That's the question.
Okay. That first of all, that reference of the two witnesses is an Old Testament reference to the book of, off the top of my head, it's not Zechariah. It is Zechariah. It is Zechariah. It's a reference back to that. And I believe you can see when you read the Zechariah passage, you can understand that they were being called to faithfulness to Christ there, and that is very applicable to what's happening here. I have my view of what those two witnesses are, and as far as I can tell, one of the problems with the people that John was ministering to they were not understanding the witness. See, witnesses are more than just a person. And there was witness, it's history, it's the writings, if you will, and they were not faithful to the writings that they had and the witness that they had in history. And that's the reason, and these witnesses condemn them in the same sense. I'm getting way ahead here, I know. But in the same sense, remember when Christ says, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah? Sodom and Gomorrah at that point are witnesses against that generation. Right? Right? So, who are the witnesses? And we'll get there, we'll talk about who and what the witnesses are. But even in that case, here's Christ saying, you people are being unfaithful to me. We're going to call these witnesses against you. That's going to be your unfaithfulness that they're going to witness against.
I think I'm following you. I guess what I was trying to, maybe to clarify, in order to understand Revelations, we need to be faithful. To get
at a minimum, we need to see that it is a book about being faithful.
Okay. All right.
At a minimum.
Okay, I'm sorry. I did not get that.
Yeah.
Okay.
At a minimum. That's the beginning of it, not the end of it. That's definitely the beginning.
I missed that.
Okay.
Right. That's key right there.
Thanks for asking. As I say, if you have a question, somebody else does about the same thing. Yes?
I had the same question, but phrased a little differently.
There you go.
So, are you saying by interpretive key, do you mean that the preterist view is the only view that can account for the theme of faith?
No. In fact, thank you.
Okay, that was another one.
I want to do something here that might surprise some of you. I am going to quote from Revelation, illustrated and made plain by Tim LaHaye.
You better burn that.
I want you to listen to what he says. Check this out. And this applies directly to your questions this morning.
When was it written?
Before the series Left Behind series, it was written before that. I don't know which prophecy chart, or edition of which prophecy chart was written during one time, but there is a prophecy chart here. How can we not have a book of Revelation without a prophecy chart? Okay. Listen to what he says. Okay? The book of Revelation is the only book in the New Testament that presents Jesus Christ as he really is today. This is from Tim LaHaye. The Gospels introduce him as the man of sorrows, acquainted with grief during his incarnation. Revelation presents him in his true glory and majesty after his resurrection and ascension into heaven, never again to be reviled, rebuked, and spat upon. No wonder John entitled it The Revelation of Jesus Christ. Now listen to this next paragraph. There's a lot more here, I won't read it. The study of this book will warm your heart as you perceive the true Christ and his ministry to the churches for the past 2,000 years. Now, how can a guy who produces the Left Behind series and all the destruction that happens, the jet planes that crash to the earth? Of course, my son is a jet pilot. Of course, he's putting, I suppose, a lot of people at risk, I guess, because he could be raptured out. Maybe he has a co-pilot. Maybe the co-pilot's thankfully an unbeliever and can land the thing. I don't know. I would so much agree with what he just said right there. Now, to Conrad's question, with what he just said there, is that a consistent thing that he said within his view or my view, or I say the preterist view? So my response is absolutely not. This is not the only way you can see it. I think it's the best way. I think it's the most consistent way. I think it's the best. And when I approach Revelation, I am careful to say that there are not problems with my view. I just think there's less. That's how I view it. What LaHaye said right there is just kind of, I read this, I'm like, I can't believe what I just read. Presents Jesus Christ as he is today. The blessings of 2,000 years in the past. I'm like, man, this is my view of this. How in the world did this even happen? But I think it's just so obvious that not even Tim LaHaye can get around it. Which is consistent with what I believe the preterist view is. Good questions. Yeah, Dan.
I've always heard that 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 has a defense for a future rapture. What do you say about that?
I believe there is such a thing as a future rapture. It happens at the end of time. The question is, does the rapture happen at the end of history or in the midst of history? But I'm not questioning the idea of a rapture. Not questioning it. Yes.
You said there were 4 interpretive views. I only heard 3. I heard futurist, historicist, whatever that was.
Right, historicist, preterist, and the last one was spiritualist.
Oh, missed that.
Yeah, idealist really is a better. A spiritualist sounds like some medium in a tent someplace. The crystal ball conjuring up, the Wicked Witch of the West to tell us, So idealist, I think, is better.
I thought that was part of the future.
The idealist has real issues with the historicity of the book. The idealist and the historicist are really going to be at odds with each other. I would also say, quite frankly, that there are. I think I alluded to this earlier, but pretty much everybody has a view in this book of Revelation. They might fall into one camp, but they might borrow from time to time from others. Just as I think LaHaye definitely I think he totally borrows from a historicist and a preterist view in his comments there. Totally, I was shocked when I read that, and I don't see how you can be a futurist, especially a dispensationalist, and say that the book is a blessing. Every time you turn around, everybody's getting killed around here. And not just dying peacefully in their beds either. Yes?
So if we're preterists, which I would consider myself a preterist, and we say the book really is fulfilled back to chapter 21, whatever.
Yeah, or 20. Yeah.
In a nutshell, what is the benefits of reading an apocalyptic, narrative, figurative speech book like that? Is it strictly to see the faithfulness of Christ as you presented this morning, or in a nutshell, are there other motives or reasons?
Yeah.
And then I have a 2-part question after.
Right. First of all, see if I can quickly get to the 2-part question. First of all, I want to sort of address the way that I believe Christ is really, shall we say, condescending to us by telling us what he's told us. For example, it would have been enough to say, don't eat that for Adam and Eve. Don't eat that tree, because I said so. But he's gracious to us, and he says, because in the day you eat it, you're going to surely die. He really didn't have to say that second part. It should have been enough. Don't eat it. I said so. Let's move on. So what happens is I believe that through this book, Christ has been kind to us and shown us why it's beneficial to us now and later to be faithful to him. So he lays that out for us and is kind to us that way. He wouldn't have to. He could just say, you know what, you guys be faithful to me. By the way, I created the world, and you what? You were born 40 years ago. Stop asking me questions. But he doesn't do that. And I think that's part, at least, of the benefit and the value. The other value of it is what happens in Jeremiah. You know, Jeremiah tried to make this application to those people. Jeremiah ministered in the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom had been carried away because of their unfaithfulness years before. And here's Jeremiah saying, you know, your neighbors to the north got carried off for the same thing that you're doing. And their idea, of course, was shut up Jeremiah. But he was using that example in history to get them to be faithful, or to encourage them to be faithful. I think the book of Revelation applies in a very similar manner, to which Jeremiah was applying the removal of the northern kingdom.
Part two,
Yes.
or second question, is doesn't the dispensationalists almost have more reason to study the book than the preterist? The preterist says it's fulfilled, everything's done, you know, we're happy with what the outcome is. Doesn't the dispensationalists almost have more to lose in that book and more to figure out than what the preterist does?
Only if they're right.
Only if they're right.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. There was anybody ever hear the name Salem Kirban? Yeah, this one, okay. This shows my age. Salem Kirban was a prophecy chart guy when I was in my 20s. And he was applying the book of Revelation. You know how he was doing it? He was he was raising money. This is before he got into health food, if you remember that. Got into health food later. But before health food, he was in the prophecy charts. And his method of raising money, he wrote a book called Guide to Survival. Okay? And he said, look, the Bible clearly teaches that the tribulation is just around the corner. And back then, people were talking about the tribulation not being that far off, and some people were even speculating about being in it at the time. I'm talking about when I was a teenager. I remember this very clearly. We may already be in it. Look at what's happening in the Middle East. Okay? So what he did was he published this book, Guide to Survival, and it was how to survive in the Middle East in a cave. And his plan was, raise money, I need money, send me money, so I can distribute these books in caves. But that's going to be a very hard thing to do. And I've been in Israel, and those caves are pretty hard to get to, right, Shaq? Not the access to those caves, you better have a helicopter, okay? So let's raise some serious money here. We're going to place these books in these caves to help the unbelieving Jews survive the coming revelation. And so the key is who's actually able to interpret the book properly, because whoever interprets it properly is going to benefit by it the most, no matter what the application is. That's where we seriously have to start. I would say the dispensationalists, if they're wrong, then just start to interpret it right. I mean, because you're still going to be here during this thing that they believe is actually future. But if they're not correct, they're going to have, and this has been a key for me for a long time. A lot of them have given up on history. They've quit on history. So if they're wrong, then maybe they can not stop giving up on history. If they're right, maybe they should give up on history then. And history is what we're living in. We started this service today in history, right? It's history now. To give up on history is to give up on everything. You give up on history, you have nothing left. And I would say that is, somebody defined drug addiction in this way, as entirely present-oriented. They've given up on history. They can only concentrate on the present, the next fix, the next high. I think there's something to that. Okay, so Joel Saint said that dispensationalists are drug addicts. No, that's not what I said. Not what I said. Yes.
The term preterist probably needs a little bit of elaboration. Full preterism versus partial preterism. Did you want to? You're calling yourself a preterist?
Yeah. That's the difference that I alluded to this morning.
And if people look it up on the internet, they're going to
Yeah.
find some different things.
Right. There are some people they call full preterists that believe that all of Revelation has been fulfilled, and that there's no rapture in the future, and there's no consummation of history.
This is it.
These folks believe that and they use a verse like forever and ever, world without end, right? Which we have a quote from Paul, that history will just go on and on. History, in fact, is eternal. A partial preterist does not believe that. Believes that most of Revelation has been fulfilled, but not all of it. Yeah, so pay attention to what John has just said. I know we're getting into, you might feel like we're in the weeds, but this is kind of like a history time chart, if you will. There are certain things that you must understand about history in a time chart before you can plug the rest of it in. And we're talking about this, we want you to be able to plug things in here, be able to think rationally through it, and not every time you come to the book of Revelation like, oh, well, who's this guy, and where's he coming from? How's he put these verses together? There's certain things that really help you understand if you're going to be serious about studying the book. And these things we talked about are part of it. I don't want to dismiss these people that have studied an awful lot before me and say, well, I just got here yesterday, I think I got it figured out. They're just wrong. I don't want to disrespect them. Although I'm sure I have points in my history. Yes?
Just to point, John, to what John said, basically, a full preterist believes what you said. A partial still believes in a new heaven and a new earth.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of people get hung up on,
Yeah.
is the full preterist. So we're just gonna continue, living 100 years and dying, whereas a partial would, I think most of us in this room might fall in that category.
Yeah, a full preterist, as far as I can tell, does not believe that history ever has an end. See, I would argue that history begins when God created heaven and the earth. So I believe that if history has a beginning, it has to have an end. Yes.
It's kind of like what a full preterist believes that Christ's second coming happened in 70 AD.
Right.
And that was it.
Yeah.
He's not, when he said he was coming back, that was it.
Yeah.
And so everything's now done. No more fulfillment, nothing to look to the Bible for prophetically.
Right. Right. It's done. That's something they believe.
And if you
Go to find out more, there's the internet.
Yeah.
Don't expect me.
Yeah. Well, that's it. If you go to the internet and you find a full preterist website, you'll be reading it for half an hour thinking, boy, these guys have it nailed. And then you'll get to something and you'll say, wait, what?
Yeah, and there's issues, I'll just address this real quickly. There's issues with that. For example, communion. We can't serve communion and be full preterists. Anybody know why? That's your quiz question in the morning. Yeah. This do in remembrance of me until I come. This is remembrance of me until I come, right? Well, he already came. No more communion. For example. That's just a quick example. I mean, this stuff has implications. That's why we study it. It's important. And what we believe eventually comes out in our actions. It comes out. People write books. Those books, especially, it seems like the books of wickedness seem to do better at this than the books of righteousness. But these books of wickedness are written, and they don't just stay in the tower. They seep out. All right. Thank you for your attention this morning. I trust that I trust that this has been a helpful time for you this morning.